Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. This is Preacher Mars, the host of the SOS to Shout Out Show. I hope that you're blessed. You're having a wonderful day as we slide into yet another weekend. I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Don Pollard Woods, who just got a job promotion. Also, hearts out to our South African young brothers and sisters who were found dead in a bar. 21 of them. So please keep them in your duas. Again, we want to make sure we shout out Sister Ree in the loss of her cousin. You know, life is like that sometimes. And being able to take some of these things that I'm talking about and try and turn them around into something positive or something that's in the scope of worthwhile learning, you know, something that is a teaching moment, if you will, is what we're going to be talking about today. From tragedy to triumph, the art of the pivot. And I was just talking to Satana. That's right, Satana's on the show today. I was just talking to Satana about the scope of how people do these pivots. Now, everyone's going to have a basic understanding of how you make a pivot, when you make a pivot, what's strategic, what's not. And sometimes we make emotional pivots. Let's just be really, really honest. But I think the thing today is I want to be able to break it down so it's, one, it's digestible for people, and two, it's applicable. You know, we're all in places of our lives where we have to make pivots. I mean, I have to do it. You've had to do it. We had a whole pandemic that we had to go through that was nothing but trying to relearn and implement new strategies to get us from point A to point B. We've been so used to going from A to B to C to E to E to F, but then we needed something just to get us from A to C. And this is no different. You know, this is no different. The scope of the pivot is interesting because it's a little bit nuanced. You know, when I started this whole idea of per se being a stand-up comic, what I was declaring was I was going to be my own startup. I was going to be my own startup company. And when I say my own startup company, it was not just telling jokes. It was developing an economy whereby people would seek out my services, whereby people would want to hire me, whereby when I got in spaces, I could see where I could diversify my skills. Now, this is nothing specific to me. This happens to everybody. You will get into a situation scenario where you're going to diversify, where you're going to do meaningful segmentation in terms of what is going to bring you, whether it's going to bring you more skills or opportunities, whether it's going to bring you more revenue, whether it's going to bring you just peace of mind, whether it's going to bring you a situation scenario where you can start your own shop for whatever business that you have. The art of the pivot is crucial because the art of the pivot begins with the fact that information is not going to be out there in an applicable way where you can just get it. Everybody's not going to have access to the same type of information. It's just like water and fish. You know, there's fish upstream, then there's fish downstream. Somehow the fish upstream is a lot fresher than the fish downstream. Maybe it's the water, maybe it's the life cycle of the fish downstream, but, you know, everyone aspires to get that water, get that fish. You know, I always used to have the visualization of salmon jumping out of the water. And my whole idea was, why can't we just grab the salmon out of the water before we have to wait several months in processing for the fish to show up to the grocery store? I wanted that fresh salmon, and that fresh salmon represents a lot symbolically and metaphorically the art of the pivot. So I would encourage everybody to stick here, hang out. Today is going to be a good talk. We had a good time yesterday, and I want to give everybody a hand who laughed with me. And I was just being totally honest yesterday. It was a good show. We had some good fun. But damn, I'm old, and that being old requires a pivot too. So, you know, just so you know, you're gonna be making them till you can't pivot no more. So that being said, I want to go ahead and get the show started out because we got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to be introducing a little video that can begin to get us talking about this whole idea of the pivot. Now, this gentleman that we're going to bring on has his ideas, but guess what? Your brother Preacher Moss has my ideas, and guess what? By the end of this show, inshallah, you'll have your ideas. Okay, this is Preacher Moss. We're starting out on the SOS Shout Out Show, from tragedy to triumph, the art of the pivot. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. So here we are. Before we get started, I want to make sure, I would suggest for this show, maybe you get a pen and paper, a pen and pencil, and take down some of the notes from the show. This is a valuable game that Preacher Moss is giving you from the Mary Moss house. This is valuable game I'm getting ready to give you. This is stuff I normally would do in terms of consulting with a company or a client, a convenient urgent care or something like that, or political stuff. But I'm gonna give you guys a game because you've been such good people, and I've been so supportive of this platform for over 2 years. So I'm just gonna give y'all the game, and you do with it whatever you want to. And in fact, if you have questions, go to permissiblelaughter@gmail.com. Send your questions in. I will answer your questions. Okay. So this is a bit of an information system, a session, if you will, but it's an information system. I'm going to stick with that because what we tried to do in a bit of a pivot, while we were doing so much stuff that had to do with current events, what was happening was like, these are not learning opportunities for the people that turn to the show. When I do comedy, I like for people to laugh, but I like people to learn. News is me telling you what you already heard about, and maybe a little splash of my interpretation of what happened. Well, guess what? You can't get paid off of news that's already been done, brothers and sisters. But if you take the scope of the pivot and what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes, I think you're going to appreciate yourself a little bit more. You're going to appreciate your own creativity a little bit more. Okay. So before we get that, we got to get in our box here. We got to talk to our Shout Out Show soldiers, our Shout Out Show family. There we go, Sister Ree. Family, full recovery. My family, thanks for your prayers. Absolutely. Keep us posted on the services. Yes, I made dua for your first cousin, your godson. I did do that because it's necessary. So anything we can do, Ree, it is time for your family or their family. Please let us know. Okay. Again, it's very, very sorry for your loss. Next up. All talk for she, Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down. Our Canadian envoy to the show, no longer the ambassador. I see Adam on the show. We're gonna make Adam an ambassador because there's a new position now on the Shout Out Show. So we have the envoy, and Adam, I'm gonna make you the ambassador. I'll talk for sheep while I lick my salon for two about the cops. Is our new envoy to the show, Mr. 6 o'clock, man. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's all love, man. We appreciate to see your face in the place. Thank you so much. Next up. Bilal Salahuddin. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and your queen, brother. Are y'all in the same room today? Are you in the same house? It don't matter. Wherever you are, she is. Wherever she is, you are. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love that picture you sent me, man, about the Muslim Brotherhood, man. I think I mentioned it yesterday, but I didn't have your permission. I would have loved to show it, but I'll leave it at that. Great picture, man. It brought some really, really good memories up. Because Cuba Institute, that's they have a deep part of my heart. Imam Anwar, Imam Anas Muhammad, those are my people right there. Thank you so much. Next up, this is the Aika. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, all the way from Depok, Indonesia, tuning in on the early hours. I see. Thank you so much for joining us. Peace and blessings to you and your family. Next up, my main man, Adam Khan, my running mate. When I get into Toronto, man, I hope you and the family are going well. My WAP day, brother. I hope everything is good. And thank you so much for tuning into the show. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You have a new title, Adam. And you have to be like Altaf. Altaf is a soldier. He shows up every day We are not going to give you the ambassador position if you're not going to be steady in your job and be accountable for your role, brother. So make sure you stay in there. Good to see you, though, man. Please give my salams to your family. Next up, my brother Johnny L. Thomas, who I will be seeing next week. I will be performing at the Milwaukee leg of the tour. Care, get out the jokes. I will be there with Musa the comedian, Athir. I can't remember her name, another comedian. I told y'all I'm getting old. As long as I know I'm where I'm supposed to be, that's all I should be responsible for. In the right, Satana, I shouldn't have to worry about the other comedians. Just make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be. That's all I can worry about these days. All right. So shout out JT. I will be there on Friday in Chicago. I'm gonna take the shuttle up, and you and I will go have breakfast downtown in Milwaukee. And you drop me off for Juma, and then pick me up for Juma, and then I'll rest. There you go. That's the whole game plan. Look at Satana. She's laughing. I'm giving out facts. But anybody that wants to be the show, listen. You can get on a flight with me from Detroit to Chicago and take the shuttle with me. I don't care. I'll work it out. Satana, I'm saying these things out loud so I don't forget them. And now they're recorded. So if I get stuck, I can go to the tape. All right, next up. All right, yes. You are most certainly welcome, Sister Reed. You know you're most certainly welcome. You're family. So family looks out for family. Thank you so much. And okay, we got Mary Mom talking about hello family. How you doing, Mom? Good to see you on the show. Look at you using big words like pivot. That ain't a big word, Mom. You just mad because you don't use it. Like you said, just say change, turn. You talk. You know what? You might as well just throw in some of them old Southern terms. That's sure enough. That's what you got to do. That's the way it sounds. That's what pivot sounds like. Below the Mason-Dixon line. That's what you got to do. Mm-hmm. That's a word down there. Mm-hmm. So, that's a whole sentence. Yep. Mm-hmm. Period. Okay. I had to go there. Thank you so much. And we have the lovely consultant producer, our sister Satana Whitfield joining in. What'd she say here? Hajj Mubarak. Hajj Mabur is Mubarak. Hajj Mabur. Okay. She's been to Hajj. Okay. Hajj to those making the Hajj journey. Hajj Mabur. To those making the Hajj journey. Day of Arafat is on Friday, so everybody's gonna be hungry at Juma. Is that right, Satana? Everybody's supposed to be hungry at Juma. You coming in some breath mints? You've been cheating. Okay, so I had to throw that in there. So Satana has actually been to Hajj. We probably should have had you talk about going to Hajj. I can tell you about almost going to Hajj, but nobody want to hear that story. Okay, let's get started. A lot of stuff to cover here today. From tragedy to triumph, the art of the pivot. Here's where the whole idea of the pivot comes from. And it is not the gentleman I'm going to show you. This is a white gentleman. He uses the idea of the pivot, and he has this whole idea. He wrote a book called The Lean Startup. His name is Eric Rod. I have nothing against him. The pivot is the understanding in some regards that the straight line is not going to get you to what your goal is. You're going to have to make and manufacture some moves and opportunities that will create strategic advantage for what you want to do. I'm not ready for them yet. Thank you. Get that white man over the shoulder like a government. Thank you. But what I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, is just when we talk about the pivot, I learned the pivot from the people who didn't have rights. Let me frame this for you. I watched the magic and the creativity of people who were able to develop culture, develop community, fight back with laws and legal prowess in the space of not having rights, meaning that they challenge people for basic things like meaningful things like equality, freedom, justice in many regards. And why is this important? Because people have taken this whole concept of meaningful struggle and they tell you that it's a pivot. When they tell you that it's a pivot, it doesn't include the environment of where these pivots are coming from. Case in point, I'm going to show you this video here in a couple minutes, just 3 minutes. And what this guy is going to explain to you what the challenges were from these particular companies, the pivot, and how you know them now. I'll give you guys a great example. And this is just my example. When I was a young comedian in Milwaukee, and JT will back me up, I was able to work all around the city. I had a name, I had a face, I was in the newspaper, da, da, da. But when I would work the clubs, I was relegated to opener middle status. They wouldn't allow me to close shows. And only shows I'd be able to close, I would have to go out of town, miles, 100, 200 miles out of town to get subpar pay. But I would do it because it would allow me to grow into the role, if you will. So being able to do an hour was important because in the clubs, you're only doing 45 minutes. So I was able to develop them. But here's where the pivot comes. One club in particular, the Comedy Cafe, is now defunct. Don't worry about it. But there was a guy there. I thought he was a friend. He was a friend. His name was JD. And what he felt was if he kept me in that role as the middle, he wouldn't have to pay me what he paid the headliners. Headliners were getting $1,400, $1,500, $1,600. The middle always got $500. And his idea was if I keep you in the middle, I'm still getting a really, really quality show and let you go extra 5 minutes, 35 minutes. The headline is going 45 minutes. He wasn't paying me headliner pay. The pivot happens when a friend of mine, his name is Owen Smith. He was the showrunner for the last season of The Last OG. What he introduced to me was you have to diversify markets. He said, we can't be in this space in terms of comedy all the time. He says, looking at your material is very funny. You have a lot of information. He said, you haven't explored the information market. I was like, what do you mean? The information market turned out to be the college market, where I was being able to still do that hour, pretty much the same hour I was doing. But in the information market, my act was much more valued. It had a much higher valuation, where I would do 45 minutes or an hour at these random spots, especially during the summer. That, I mean, oh my gosh, Mackinac Island, I can't even tell you where these places are. But I would do, and I get $300. Owen, in this conversation, had in my mind I had to pivot. Now, here's something that's really important, brothers and sisters. When we say pivot, we do not mean U-turn. When we say pivot, we don't mean U-turn. U-turn is going back to where you just came from. Pivot is like the military. Like when you march left, 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 right, left. Well, guess what? There's a call in the military called an oblique. JT knows about this. And you were right oblique, left. And instead of turning this way, turn that way, you would turn a 45-degree angle. Left oblique, march, and you turn that way. Pivoting is like having an oblique in your toolbox of things that you use. And oblique is very important. You know why? Because it doesn't necessarily break away from everything that you've been doing. It doesn't necessarily crash your whole strategy. It tweaks it a little bit. I talked to a baseball player. He was a pretty well-known baseball player. And he told me about his fastball. He could throw a ball literally from a mound. He could throw a ball literally 100 miles an hour, 98 miles an hour. And he said the thing that saved his career was some guy told him, if you take the speed off the ball, you change the trajectory. Not only are you still throwing a ball that's very, very difficult to hit, but you save your arm. And I'm like, man. And he talked about that pivot. I'm talking about the same thing about this club. So I went and investigated what was going on in the college market, which was presented to me as the information market. And guess what? In the college market, they paid a lot more. You get $500 working as a middle in a club with an owner who doesn't want to see you be a headliner. You are your own person over here at the college doing an hour, and they were paying you for an hour an average of $1,500 to $2,500 for an hour. I was doing a whole week at this comedy club. Wednesday, Thursday, 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday, sometimes a show on Sunday for $500. You see now where the pivot comes from. And if you start thinking like this, like whenever you get into a situation, You need to just start thinking about a pivot. It may never happen. It may just become an option. But start thinking about a pivot. Now, I'm going to show you guys this video. Man, we're already at 20 minutes, Satana. I blew this today. I'm going to show you guys this video and we're going to come back. Satana, can we bring it up? Thank you.
I was groping around for a way to describe a phenomenon that I kept seeing in the startups I was working with. So I wrote a blog post. I mean, a blog post, it wasn't like coining the term pivot. It just said, pivot, don't jump to a new vision. Now I'm good at encapsulating it crisply. A pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. I show in my slides now a cartoon I saw, I kid you not, in the New Yorker magazine. There's a man and a woman sitting in an outdoor cafe, and the caption below says, "I'm not leaving you, I'm pivoting to another man." So the word pivot is probably my most notorious contribution to the startup vernacular. Here's the critical thing you got to understand about the pivot. It's really very simple. You get in your car, you don't boot up your GPS and say, GPS, where do I want to go? It doesn't know, it's just a robot. It helps you get where you want to go. So the vision is the destination you have in mind. But if you run into an obstacle, you don't just drive your car into the obstacle over and over again in the hopes that it will be fine. You, with the help of your GPS, find a way around. Okay, very simple. Startups that succeed all do that really well. They start out with an idea that sounds good, but turns out to be terrible. YouTube started out as a dating site, and they only after people were starting to upload all kinds of video did they make the pivot to a video site. Flickr was an online video game. One of the things you could do in the online game was upload photos. And since that's the only thing players actually did, they said, hey, maybe we make it, we call it a zoom in pivot, where you take one part of the product and you make the whole product, you shrink it down to just that one thing. You make the world's best photo uploading service, even though you meant to make an online game. First version of Twitter was this thing called Odeo, which is a podcasting service. When they made the pivot to Twitter, it only had a few hundred customers, so the so-called vanity metrics were so low, they actually went to their investors and said, we're so embarrassed about these results, would you like your money back? And several of Silicon Valley's best investors made what is now a billion-dollar mistake of saying, yes, thank you. So you look at PayPal, which is about like digital cyber cash on your PDA. You're like, boy, what kind of visionary is that? But they had the vision for online payments in some form. They just didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. Let's talk about Groupon, because it was one of my favorites. Groupon started out as a business called The Point, which was designed to help people do petitions. So imagine that you're like, okay, I want to do a protest at City Hall. I'm mad about something. I don't want to be the only person who shows up. So we have a petition where if 100 people sign up and say, we'll all go to the protest, it tips and we all do it. If we never get to 100, it doesn't tip. Great idea, right? Wrong. They got no traction at all. It was a disaster. Didn't work. So they're like, okay, we got to try something new. They decided to try the social commerce thing. Social commerce is about creating coupons where we all get a discount if we all buy at the same time. I think it was 2-for-1 pizza in the pizza restaurant in the lobby of their building. Okay, that was the breakthrough technology. 20 people redeemed it. Now, I don't know about you. If I had been there, I would have known. Oh, obviously, 20 free pizzas equals fastest company in history to get $1 billion in sales. But most of us, let's be honest, we would not have known. 20 free pizzas, whatever. The reason the Groupon founders understood the power of selling 20 free pizzas is that they had failed for a year to get anybody to buy anything at all. Actually made them excited enough to try the next experiment and the next and the next and the next. That's what a pivot is. It is redeeming the failure because we learned so much about what's possible. That's the name of the game. That's what this is about.
We'll be right back after these messages. Hey, babies. Welcome to Radio WCUC, Convenient Urgent Care, home of the smart patient. This is DJ What It Do. You know what time it is. It's the top of the hour, and the request lines are open. You know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Operators are waiting.
I just got to hear, don't get the COVID.
Don't get the COVID. Put your mask back on. The Delta COVID, more contagious than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get the vaccine. You know that it can keep you safe, and your people living up in your space. Don't get the COVID. You need to wash your hands. The Delta COVID is more deadly than before. Don't get the COVID. Go on and get your vaccine. You know that it can keep you from dying. Don't leave your family all alone and crying. Don't get the COVID. we invite you to join our fight against COVID and against misinformation. It's time to listen to the doctors and trust the science. When I think of people dying that don't have to die, it makes me sad. Now's the time to be sober. Together we can make this thing over. Let's fight the COVID. Convenient urgent care, home of the smart patient.
Okay, we're back. I hope you enjoyed that little video thing. I always resonate with the whole thing about Groupon. I was hanging out with a guy in Detroit who we were going to his little spot. He had a little workspace, and he said, "Hey, listen, I have these Groupons, and I'm in Detroit. You know, your brother don't know anything about Groupons when they first came out." And he said, "You do this," and he explained it to me and did it. And he explained, here's the look I had on my face. Let me give you the same look I had on my face. And he was trying to tell me about Groupon, and I'm like, "Oh, I got it. It's like a discount thing." And he was so excited about it, and on and on. And more, I had that look on my face. The more he tried to explain it, God bless him. And then we went down to his little shop, and there was maybe like 3 or 4 people. He's trying to explain this project that he was doing, and da-da-da. Well, that guy's name is Chris Blauvet. And Chris Blauvet is the founder of LaunchGood.com. And I sat with this guy as he tried to tell me all his visions about LaunchGood, and as the look I had on my face was but my point was, redeeming the failures of LaunchGood. If you go on their website now, they have continued to embrace the pivot. Just so you guys know, LaunchGood is not a nonprofit organization. They are a for-profit organization, and I'm proud that they are. Because you can go to LaunchGood anytime and realize that people are raising money on LaunchGood. They take a portion for hosting the campaigns, but really, what's hosting the campaigns is really having a lot of a server space to put these programs up, and they have done a whole lot of things. I've done two campaigns on LaunchGood, so I'm just telling you, folks, these things are important. Embrace the pivot. And even in your health, a lot of times, embrace the pivot. Sometimes when we talk to our parents and our loved ones, we tell them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, but we don't talk to them about how they can pivot towards better things. In business, a lot of times, and I will say this particularly about African Americans, people of color, you're not taught to pivot. What you're taught to do is endure pain. And the way that you endure pain is that doors have been closed to you, not just historically, but legally. Legally have been closed to you. But here's the beautiful part. Your ancestors, your forefathers, some of your relatives, they figured out ways to pivot around that anyway. Think about this. Have you ever been at home and you're sitting at home and the phone rings and you pick it up and it's somebody you don't want to talk to. You know who they are. And you hang the phone up, and next thing you know, this happened to me. I got a fruit basket, and I opened up the fruit basket, and it was a note. Preach, loan me $300. I said, and I said, how in the world did you send me a fruit basket that's $35 and you want to borrow a couple $100? He said, well, I borrowed 10 for him and 10 for him. And I told him I'd pay him about a month. He said, I got the fruit basket, send it to you. I said, well, guess what? You still ain't getting that money, but I'm going to give you $100. Why? Because I like creativity. Because he knew he wasn't going to get back to me because he owed me money. My case in point, brothers and sisters, as we begin to wrap up, embrace the pivots. Look for the pivots in your life. They are there. Explore the pivots. If you don't use them, they're just options. If you do use them, then you are, in many ways, like we said, you're changing the strategy without changing the vision, right? You are redeeming the failures, and You're going to open up yourself to a whole lot of different opportunities that you normally would not have gotten and people would not have introduced to you. All right. So from tragedy to triumph, the art of the pivot. That's our show. Shout out to brother Eric Carter, Wild Lake Salon, off to over the culture, beloved. Thanks for being on the show. That is our show. I got to get ready to pivot up out of here. Take care, and I will see you, inshallah, on Monday. Preacher Mars, the Shout Out Show. Take care now.